I am about to show you exactly how to adjust the timing and combination of magnesium glycinate, vitamin D3, and vitamin K2 to stop the hidden energy crashes and absorption issues that affect people over 60. You are likely taking these 3 supplements because you want stronger bones, better sleep, and more stable energy. But if you take them in the wrong order or without the right food, you might be creating a chemical conflict in your body that blocks their benefits. There is a very specific way these compounds interact with your biology, and most standard advice ignores the delicate changes that happen to our digestion and metabolism as we age. I remember a woman named Margaret, who was 72 years old and came to me feeling completely exhausted despite doing everything right for her health. She had read online that this specific trio of supplements was the holy grail for aging, so she started taking all 3 of them first thing in the morning with her black coffee. Instead of feeling energized, she felt sluggish by noon, her joints were still stiff, and her sleep was actually getting worse. I realized that her doctor had checked her blood levels, which looked fine on paper, but had never asked her when or how she was swallowing these pills. The problem wasn't the supplements themselves, it was that she was unknowingly fighting her body's natural rhythm and digestive capabilities. It is quite possible that your own healthcare provider has not mentioned the importance of timing and food pairings, leaving you to guess and potentially waste your money on pills that are passing right through you. Before we begin, a critical disclaimer. The information I'm sharing today is strictly for educational purposes and should not be considered medical advice. I am not your personal physician and cannot provide individualized medical guidance through this video. 1. Separate the timing of your vitamin D3 and your magnesium glycinate to match your circadian rhythm. This is the single most important change you can make immediately to feel a difference in your energy levels and sleep quality within days. You must stop taking magnesium glycinate at the exact same moment you take your vitamin D3 if you are taking them in the morning, because they send opposing signals to your brain and nervous system. Vitamin D3 is biologically designed to mimic the effects of sunlight, which signals your body that it is time to be awake, alert, and active, while magnesium glycinate is a calming mineral that promotes relaxation and prepares the nervous system for rest. When you take them together, you are essentially hitting the gas pedal and the brake pedal at the same time, which can lead to a strange sensation of being tired but wired, or simply feeling flat throughout the day. I recall a patient named Robert, a 68-year-old retired engineer who prided himself on his strict routine. Robert would line up all his pills, his blood pressure medication, his vitamins, and his minerals, and swallow them all at 7 a.m. with his breakfast because he was afraid he would forget them later. He complained constantly of morning fog and a lack of motivation that lasted until lunch, and he assumed this was just a normal part of getting older. We simply moved his magnesium glycinate to 1 hour before bed and kept his vitamin D3 at breakfast. Within 3 days, Robert reported that his morning fog had lifted significantly, and surprisingly, he was sleeping more deeply at night because the magnesium was finally being used for its intended purpose of sedation rather than fighting against his morning alertness. The explanation for this lies in the biological function of these nutrients beyond just bone health. While they do work together to deposit calcium into the bone matrix, they do not need to be in your stomach at the same second to do that job effectively. Vitamin D3 has a relatively long half-life in the body, meaning it stays in your system for a while, so taking it in the morning allows it to do its job of calcium absorption throughout the day. Magnesium is used up more quickly by the body for hundreds of enzymatic processes, including stress management and muscle function. By separating them, you allow the vitamin D3 to support your daytime circadian alignment, helping you feel awake, and you allow the magnesium to support your nocturnal cycle, helping your muscles relax and your brain to drift into sleep cycles. Here is how you should structure this practically to avoid confusion. Keep your bottle of vitamin D3 and vitamin K2, which we will discuss in a moment, in the kitchen or wherever you eat your breakfast or lunch. Take this dose when the sun is out, ideally before 2 p.m., to prevent any interference with your melatonin production later in the evening. Then, keep your magnesium glycinate bottle on your nightstand or in the bathroom where you brush your teeth at night. Take your prescribed dose of magnesium about 30 to 60 minutes before you plan to go to sleep. This creates a physical separation of the pills that acts as a reminder, ensuring you never accidentally take the sleep signal in the morning or the wake signal at night. 2. Always consume your vitamin D3 and K2 with a meal containing at least 5 grams of healthy fat. This is a non-negotiable rule for anyone over 60 because of how our digestive efficiency changes as we age. Vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 are strictly fat-soluble vitamins, which means they do not dissolve in water and cannot be absorbed by your intestines unless there is dietary fat present to trigger the release of bile. If you take these vitamins with a glass of water, black coffee, tea, or a fat-free breakfast like dry toast or fruit, you are absorbing almost none of the supplement. It will simply pass through your digestive tract and be eliminated, providing zero benefit to your bones or immune system. As we get older, our stomach acid becomes weaker, and our gallbladder may not release bile as aggressively as it did when we were younger, making the presence of fat even more critical for absorption. This matters because millions of seniors are unknowingly flushing their money down the toilet by taking dry supplements. You might look at the label on your supplement bottle and see a high dosage, assuming that this is the amount entering your bloodstream, but bioavailability is the only thing that counts. Without fat to stimulate the gallbladder to release bile acids, the vitamin D3 and K2 molecules remain locked and cannot cross the intestinal wall to get into your lymphatic system and bloodstream. This is particularly problematic for seniors who have adopted low-fat diets for heart health or who simply have smaller appetites in the morning and stick to simple carbohydrates like oatmeal or toast, which do not contain enough lipids to activate this transport mechanism. I remember a patient named Eleanor who was 64 and very diligent about her health, yet her blood tests consistently showed low vitamin D levels, despite her taking a high-quality supplement every single day. She was frustrated and confused, fearing that she had a malabsorption disorder or a more serious underlying condition. When we reviewed her diet diary, I saw that she took her vitamins at 6 a.m. with a cup of herbal tea and didn't eat her first meal until 10 a.m., which was usually a bowl of fruit. She was effectively taking a fat-soluble vitamin in a completely fat-free environment. We made one simple change. She started eating 2 hard-boiled eggs or half an avocado with her morning vitamins. 3 months later, her vitamin D levels had nearly doubled without her changing the dosage of the pill itself, simply because her body was finally able to absorb what she was swallowing. The direct explanation for this involves the physiology of digestion. When fat enters the small intestine, it triggers a hormone that signals the gallbladder to contract and squirt bile into the digestive tract. This bile acts like a detergent, breaking down fats and fat-soluble vitamins into tiny droplets called micelles. These micelles are small enough to be transported across the lining of the intestine and into the body. Without the fat to trigger this bile release, the vitamins remain in large, unusable clusters. Since vitamin D3 and K2 are expensive and crucial for preventing osteoporosis and calcification of the arteries, ensuring they are absorbed is just as important as remembering to take them. To do this correctly, you do not need to eat a heavy or greasy meal, which might be uncomfortable for your digestion. You simply need a threshold amount of fat, generally around 5 to 10 grams. Good options that are senior-friendly and easy to digest include a tablespoon of olive oil drizzled over toast, a few slices of avocado, a handful of walnuts or almonds, a hard-boiled egg, or even a spoonful of nut butter. If you prefer to have your supplements with lunch because your breakfast is usually light, that is perfectly fine, as long as the meal contains some fat source. If you are taking a vitamin D supplement that comes suspended in oil, a soft gel, this helps slightly, but it is rarely enough fat on its own to trigger full bile release, so pairing it with food is still the safest strategy. 3. Stop taking high-dose calcium supplements if you are on this protocol unless explicitly prescribed. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive advice for many seniors who have been told for decades that calcium is the key to strong bones, but it is a critical safety step when you are taking vitamin D3, K2, and magnesium. The combination of D3 and K2 is designed to manage the calcium you get from your diet, directing it into your bones and keeping it out of your soft tissues like arteries and joints. However, if you add a high-dose calcium supplement, like 1,000 mg or 1,200 mg of calcium carbonate, on top of this efficient transport system, you can overwhelm the body's ability to handle the mineral. Excessive calcium intake from supplements, unlike calcium from food, has been linked in some studies to an increased risk of arterial calcification and kidney stones, especially in older adults. Why this matters is rooted in the calcium paradox. This is a situation where an older adult can have osteoporosis, weak bones, and atherosclerosis, hardened arteries, at the same time. The problem is often not a lack of calcium entering the body, but a problem of distribution. Vitamin D3 increases the absorption of calcium from your gut, pulling more of it into your blood. Vitamin K2 acts as the traffic controller, activating a protein called osteocalcin that grabs that calcium and stuffs it into the bone, and another protein called matrix GLA that sweeps calcium out of the arteries. If you flood your system with a massive surplus of calcium from pills while taking vitamin D3, you create a backlog that even vitamin K2 cannot manage, potentially leading to calcium deposits in places where you definitely do not want them, like your heart valves or shoulder joints. I think of a patient named Arthur, a 70-year-old man who was incredibly anxious about his bone density because his father had suffered a hip fracture. Arthur was taking 1,200 milliliters of calcium supplements, plus a multivitamin with calcium, plus drinking milk, and he recently added high-dose vitamin D3 and K2. He began complaining of generalized stiffness and constipation, which are classic signs of calcium overload. We calculated his total intake and realized he was getting nearly 2,000 nanomoles of calcium a day, which is far too much. We stopped the calcium pills completely, kept him on the D3, K2, and magnesium, and relied on his diet for calcium. His stiffness improved, his digestion regulated, and his follow-up scans showed his bone density remained stable because the D3 and K2 were finally efficiently using the calcium from his yogurt and cheese. The explanation is that your body handles food-based calcium very differently from rock-based calcium supplements. Calcium from food, like dairy, leafy greens, or sardines, is released slowly during digestion and comes packaged with other nutrients that help absorption. Large boluses of supplemental calcium cause a rapid spike in blood calcium levels, which can shock the system. When you are taking vitamin D3, your efficiency at absorbing calcium skyrockets. You effectively become a super absorber. Therefore, you typically do not need to supplement with extra massive doses of calcium because the D3 is helping you extract maximum value from the food you are already eating. The magnesium glycinate further balances this by acting as a natural calcium channel blocker, preventing calcium from overexciting your cells. How to do this safely involves doing a quick audit of your diet. If you eat 2 to 3 servings of calcium-rich foods per day, such as a cup of Greek yogurt, a slice of cheese, and a serving of broccoli or almonds, you are likely getting around 700 to 1,000 millimolar of calcium naturally. This is the sweet spot when you have vitamin D3 and K2 optimizing the process. Focus on keeping your calcium background steady through food. If you must take a supplement because your doctor insists or because you are completely dairy-free and dislike leafy greens, look for smaller doses, like 200 to 300 milliliter, rather than the massive 1,000 milliliter tablets, and try to use calcium citrate or hydroxyapatite rather than calcium carbonate, as they are gentler on the system. 4. Check specifically for interactions with blood-thinning medication before adding vitamin K2. This is a critical safety step that is often overlooked in the excitement about bone health, yet it is arguably the most dangerous oversight for anyone over 60 taking prescription medication. Vitamin K2 is powerful because it directs calcium into the bones and out of the arteries, but it does this by activating proteins that are chemically very similar to the clotting factors in your blood. If you are taking a blood thinner like warfarin or Coumadin, these drugs work by deliberately blocking the action of vitamin K to prevent clots. When you take a supplement containing vitamin K2, you are essentially introducing the very antidote to your medication, which can destabilize your blood levels and put you at risk of either a clot or a bleed, depending on the dosage. I recall a patient named Thomas, a 74-year-old man who had been on a stable dose of warfarin for 5 years, following a minor heart valve procedure. He read an article about how vitamin K2 could reverse arterial calcification, so he bought a high-potency K2 supplement and started taking it daily without telling his cardiologist. Within 2 weeks, his INR levels, which measure how fast his blood clots, dropped dangerously low, meaning his blood was too thick and his medication had stopped working. Thomas was confused and blamed the pharmacy, thinking his medication was defective. It wasn't until we reviewed his new health routine that we found the K2 supplement was the culprit. Once he stopped the K2 and consulted his specialist, his levels returned to normal, but he had spent a month in a very risky state simply because he didn't realize that natural vitamins can still be potent biological agents. The explanation for this interaction is that vitamin K is a recycling vitamin. Your body reuses it multiple times to activate clotting factors in the liver. Warfarin stops this recycling process to keep your blood thin. When you add external vitamin K2, you bypass the blockade warfarin has created, effectively canceling out the drug's effect. This doesn't mean you can never take K2, but it changes the rules entirely. Some newer blood thinners do not interact with vitamin K in the same way, but the older, common ones absolutely do. It is a chemical tug-of-war happening in your bloodstream, and usually the supplement wins, which is not what you want when you are trying to prevent a stroke. How to do this safely involves a direct conversation with the doctor who manages your prescriptions. Do not rely on a generic internet search. Bring your bottle of vitamin D3 and K2 to your next appointment and ask, "Does this specific form of vitamin K interfere with my medication?" In some cases, doctors will actually allow a small, consistent dose of K2 and adjust your medication around it to keep your levels stable, because the bone benefits are significant. However, this must be monitored with frequent blood tests. If you cannot take K2, simply taking vitamin D3 and magnesium glycinate is still highly beneficial and much safer than risking a medication interaction. 5. Balance your magnesium intake to match your vitamin D3 dosage to avoid the magnesium tax. This is the hidden reason why so many people start a vitamin D protocol and actually feel worse, developing headaches, anxiety, or muscle cramps within the first month. Vitamin D3 does not work alone. It is biologically inactive until your body converts it into its active form, a hormone called calcitriol. This conversion process happens in the liver and kidneys, and it is entirely dependent on magnesium. Every single molecule of vitamin D3 you take demands magnesium to be processed. If you are already low on magnesium, which is true for about 80% of adults over 60, and you start taking high-dose vitamin D3, like 5,000 or 10,000 IU, you are effectively taxing your remaining magnesium reserves to process the D. This creates a functional magnesium deficiency that can feel terrible, even though you are taking a healthy vitamin. I think of a patient named Linda who was 66 and suffered from occasional leg cramps at night. She visited her primary care physician and was told her vitamin D was low, so she was prescribed a high-dose weekly supplement. 2 weeks later, Linda's leg cramps had turned into severe, agonizing Charlie horses that woke her up screaming in pain, and she also started noticing a twitch in her left eyelid. She assumed the vitamin D was toxic and stopped taking it. When we looked closer, we saw that she wasn't taking any magnesium at all. The high dose of vitamin D had sucked up the last of her free magnesium to perform its enzymatic duties, leaving her muscles without the mineral they needed to relax. We restarted the vitamin D, but added 400 milliliters of magnesium glycinate daily. The cramps vanished, and she finally got the energy boost she was promised. The direct explanation is that magnesium acts as the key to the ignition of vitamin D. Without magnesium, vitamin D is stored in your body but remains largely useless, or worse, accumulates in ways that aren't helpful. Furthermore, all the enzymes that metabolize vitamin D require magnesium as a cofactor. It is a simple supply and demand equation. When you increase the demand by taking more vitamin D, you must increase the supply of the fuel, magnesium. If you don't, the body will pull magnesium from your bones or muscles to keep the process going, which leads to the paradoxical symptoms of feeling stiffer and more anxious on a health protocol. How to do this correctly is to think in terms of a rough ratio. While everyone is different, a good rule of thumb for seniors is to ensure you are getting enough magnesium to cover the tax. If you are taking 1,000 to 5,000 IU of vitamin D3, you should aim for approximately 200 to 400 milliliters of elemental magnesium glycinate. You do not need to do complex math every day. Simply ensuring you are taking your magnesium supplement consistently alongside your vitamin D therapy is usually enough. If you increase your vitamin D dose during the winter months, you should be mindful to perhaps slightly increase your magnesium or ensure you are eating more magnesium-rich foods like pumpkin seeds or spinach. 6. Keep your magnesium and vitamin D at least 2 hours away from high-fiber foods and coffee. This is a lifestyle adjustment that can double the absorption of your supplements without costing you a penny. We often think of fiber and coffee as healthy parts of a senior diet, and they are, but they are also potent anti-nutrients when it comes to mineral absorption. Coffee contains tannins and caffeine, which can speed up digestion and physically bind to minerals like magnesium, flushing them out before they can be absorbed. Similarly, high-fiber foods like bran, oatmeal, or psyllium husk supplements contain phytates. These phytates act like little magnets in your digestive tract, latching onto minerals like magnesium, zinc, and calcium, and carrying them out of the body in your stool. If you take your expensive magnesium glycinate and vitamin D right in the middle of a bowl of bran cereal and a cup of strong coffee, you are likely losing 50% or more of the benefit. I remember a patient named James, a 71-year-old who was incredibly disciplined. Every morning at 8 a.m., he ate a large bowl of steel-cut oats with flaxseed, drank 2 cups of black coffee, and took his entire handful of supplements. He came to me confused because his blood work showed his mineral levels were barely moving, despite him buying the highest quality brands. He felt he was doing everything right. The problem wasn't the quality of the supplement, it was the traffic jam in his gut. The fiber from the oats and the tannins from the coffee were creating a barrier. We simply moved his supplement routine to lunch, which was usually a lighter meal of chicken and salad, less fiber, no coffee. Within a month, his levels normalized. He didn't have to change his diet or give up his morning coffee, he just had to change the schedule. The explanation is mechanical. Absorption happens in specific sites in the small intestine. For a mineral molecule to be absorbed, it must touch the intestinal wall. If that molecule is bound to a large fiber complex or neutralized by a tannin, it is too large to pass through the transporter channels. It just keeps moving down the tract. Magnesium is particularly sensitive to this because it is a bulky mineral. Seniors often have slower digestion, which you would think helps absorption, but when fiber is present, it actually traps the nutrients more effectively. By separating the blockers from the builders, you give the minerals a clear runway to enter your bloodstream. How to do this is all about timing windows. Enjoy your coffee and your high-fiber breakfast as you normally would. These are great for your bowels and your brain. However, wait at least 90 minutes to 2 hours before taking your mineral supplements. Or, as we discussed in the first point, move your magnesium to the evening, away from food entirely or with a light, low-fiber snack, and take your vitamin D with a lunch that contains some fat but isn't loaded with bran or fiber supplements. This simple gap allows the coffee and fiber to move through the stomach and upper intestine first, leaving a clean environment for the delicate absorption of your vitamins later. 7. Increase your water intake by 1 glass for every supplement you add to your daily routine. This is the simplest but most forgotten rule for seniors starting a new protocol. When you introduce minerals like magnesium and electrolytes into your system, they change the way your body handles fluid. Magnesium is a hydrophilic molecule, meaning it loves water. It pulls water into the intestines, which helps with constipation, and it requires water to be processed by the kidneys. Many seniors are chronically mildly dehydrated because our thirst mechanism, the signal from the brain that says drink water, fades as we age. If you add a stack of dry pills and mineral salts to a dehydrated system, you can strain the kidneys and actually cause supplement headaches or brain fog, which is the exact opposite of what you are trying to achieve. I recall a patient named Susan, who was 69 and started the D3K2 magnesium protocol for her osteoporosis. After a week, she complained of a dull, nagging headache every afternoon and feeling dried out. She thought she was having an allergic reaction to the magnesium. When I asked her about her water intake, she admitted she only drank 2 cups of tea and maybe 1 glass of water a day because she didn't want to run to the bathroom constantly. Her kidneys were struggling to process the concentrated minerals in the supplements without enough fluid to flush them through. I asked her to drink 1 full 8-ounce glass of water specifically with her pills and another glass between meals. The headache stopped immediately, and she reported feeling more alert, as hydration is also key for cognitive function. The explanation is that your kidneys are the filtration plant of your body. They balance electrolytes and filter out waste. When you take supplements, you are increasing the workload on the filtration plant. Vitamin D3 increases calcium levels in the blood, and your kidneys need fluid to keep that calcium dissolved so it doesn't form stones. Magnesium needs fluid to be distributed to the cells. Without adequate water, the blood becomes slightly more concentrated, which can lead to sluggish circulation and that heavy, tired feeling. Water is the transport medium. Without it, the delivery trucks, the vitamins, cannot move down the highway, your blood vessels. How to do this without spending your whole day in the bathroom is to sip, not gulp. You do not need to drink a gallon of water at once, which will just run right through you. Aim to drink 4 to 6 ounces of water every hour. Crucially, when you swallow your supplements, do not just use a tiny sip to wash them down. Drink a full glass. This helps the capsule dissolve completely in the stomach and ensures there is enough fluid to start the absorption process. If you struggle with nighttime urination, stop your fluid intake 2 hours before bed, but make sure you have front-loaded your hydration earlier in the day. If you know someone over 50 who could benefit from this, share this video. And subscribe for more simple health tips.